This is CityCast Seattle. I'm Jane C. Hu, and here's what Seattle's talking about. As a new documentary digs into the tumultuous recent history of Boeing, a union representing 17,000 Boeing workers are negotiating a new contract with the company. And speaking of unions, contributor Chase Hutchinson has the latest on SIFF's union negotiations and will lament the worst loss in Mariners history. But first, you've probably seen ads for a variety of candlelight concerts around Seattle. And in a recent feature for Pacific Northwest Magazine, the Seattle Times Magazine, arts and culture writer Gemma Wilson explored who's behind those. Welcome to the show, Gemma.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Also joining us is Chase Hutchinson, journalist, critic, and host of Seattle Movies Daily. Hi, Chase.
Hello, Jane. Glad to have you back.
Yeah, glad to be back. So, Gemma, what led you to this story? You get into it a little bit in the piece, but I'm curious what piqued your interest about these concerts?
It started with the theater.
Right.
The theater element of Fever. I spend a fair amount of time looking at calendars, looking at venues, seeing what's going on. And I saw something on a local theater's calendar for the jury experience. And I was like, I don't know what this is. So, you click on it and you're like, who's making it? Who's in it? Is it a company I know? Is it a company I should know? And I just clicked on this listing and there was just not a human name to be found on here. Like, who wrote it? Who's directing it? Who's acting it? Like, absolutely nothing, which does not happen. I don't think I've ever seen before in my many years of covering this, because theater is inherently like a human created art form.
Well, so like your spidey senses were immediately like, that's weird.
Yeah. Well, and just like no amount of digging could really unearth anything, which was really strange. Except, it was produced by Fever. And I was like, well, I don't know what that is, but, we'll move on with our lives. And then I started getting like everybody else in the Instagram universe, ad after ad after ad for Candlelight concerts. You start getting texts from people like, have you been to one of these? What is this? Is it worth going to? And so I started clicking on those too. Big mistake, because then you just get more.
Right.
And then it was the same company. And I was like, well, what is it? Like, who is making this? Like,
what is
it's
Fever?
Company, but like, what? Right. Like, who are the human beings? Like, this is all live performance,
Right.
It cannot be made in a vacuum. So that's when I really started sort of going feral. And even like, I went to some shows and even seeing them, like there were no programs given out. Like it was like finding out who was in them was like an act of internet sleuthing, which I've never had to do because people want you to know what they're working on. This just does not happen. Seeing that it's happening all over the world and again, but like, who do you reach out to? Because there are no human names attached. It became a real, I feel like I said in the piece, like sort of a descent into madness of like trying to figure out who to talk to.
That really came across too, the mystery aspect of this, because I don't know, I feel like Chase, you probably can relate to this too. As journalists, sometimes you get into something and you're like, I'm going further and further down the rabbit hole and there's really something here. So Gemma, I know you ended up going to a performance of one of the Fever productions, which is called The Jury Experience. And I know in your piece you had asked, why did this live performance feel like AI slop? And I'm wondering if you can say more about it. Like, what was it that felt off to you or strange to you?
Oh, it's such an interesting, you could be glib and be like, I know it when I see it, but it's just the blandest of writing, characters that all sound exactly the same because they are written to serve a purpose rather than be a person, which makes deadly boring art in any form, in my opinion. There's sort of a standard framework when you're like starting to be a critic or learning about this stuff, which I'm sure, Chase, you've encountered, or like, it's like, it's Goethe's 3 questions, which is like, what were they trying to do? Did they do it? And was it worth doing? Those are your 3 sort of, so you go above and beyond, like, did I like it? Which is sort of irrelevant when you're actually like trying to like respond thoughtfully to a piece of art. And I think this is one of the first things, maybe the only thing I've ever seen where I was like, I have genuinely no idea to any of those 3 questions. Like, what were they trying to do? Like,
there was no artistic vision.
None. We're playing real fast and loose with the word immersive these days, just as a marketing tactic.
Yeah.
It is, and it's become like basically meaningless. So the show, you're sitting in a seat, you're watching from an audience, you are consuming it in a way you consume any other piece of theater. The way you're immersed is you're allowed to like vote via QR code on certain elements, like, should this piece of evidence be allowed into consideration for the jury, which I've never done jury duty, but I don't think that's allowed.
That's usually the judge's job, I'm pretty sure. But I guess you get to be the judge as the audience.
Yeah. Right. So you get to weigh in on these things, and then it has no real effect on the direction the story takes. That would be thrilling to have like a real impact on how the show unfolds, but you don't. It feels like, big data. Like, what do people like? They like crime, they'll do anything for an hour. They like getting their phones out once every 10 minutes.
That's not what you want during your live performance, or maybe it's just not what I want. So Gemma, all of this brought to mind for me, like, what does this say about the state of theater in Seattle? Like, you mentioned that it seems like some of the elements of these productions are algorithmically determined. Like, what do people like to see? How do we put that all together in kind of a marketable way? But what happens to art when we're using algorithms to try and determine like what people want to buy tickets to?
I think what it says in some ways actually is that there is a real hunger, because these things are selling. They're selling a lot of tickets. People want to go to engaging, compelling live performances. They want something that's going to make them feel or think or, walk out into the world in a new way. And it's really hard to find. And it's really hard to trust. And I think there's a real risk aversion sort of across the board these days. Theaters are in a really tough spot financially. And it's not getting much better. I mean, it's improving from COVID, certainly, but like things are hard, and things are getting hard for consumers as well. And so there does seem to be an attitude of like, I want to spend my money on something I know is going to entertain me. I know is going to, that's why there's such a fixation for IP, for recognizable things. I know I already like this story, so I'm willing to spend money on it. And theaters also really need to sell tickets. It's a fine line between appealing to as many people as possible and introducing things that are artistically engaging or challenging, or, if the idea of creation is to just give people what they already know or like, then like, what are we doing here? We have that already. So I think the success of Fever financially.
And so it has been successful. It seems like they're making money.
I mean, the company itself is in 2023, I think it was like almost $2 billion valuation. Like what that means, I'm not a business reporter, but I saw this show. It was really well sold. And talking to a director of one of these shows, they sell out a lot, because they are at a sort of standard price point, $40, $60, somewhere in there, which isn't crazy, but it's also, you can get a real ticket to a real ballet or symphony or theater piece for that amount of money. So it's not like it's really filling that gap in terms of accessibility. But people want this stuff. And I don't know how we really get ourselves back into, maybe it's
can you make people have better taste? Like, I mean, I guess that's kind of the question here in a way, right? Like, I mean, I think a lot of folks buy tickets to this not necessarily knowing what they're getting into, or like, they might not recognize what the local theater companies are, might not recognize that this is actually like an international company kind of producing something to make it seem local. Chase, what do you make of all of this?
I was reading through the piece, and I would recommend everybody go read it because it's like just this fascinating journey.
It's great.
I would be so curious how many people that go to this go back. I would be curious about the return kind of trends. But then also the thing I was thinking of this whole time, do you remember the Willy Wonka experience that went viral?
Yes.
Oh,
no, say more. I don't remember this.
Okay, so basically there was this thing where people were like, I'm going to go to the Willy Wonka experience. I love Willy Wonka. I love this world. I want to experience it. It was in Glasgow.
Didn't you guys see the movie though? Like, why would you want to anyway?
Well, yeah,
go on.
so there's already
Great
that
question
problem.
there. Yeah.
But when they showed up, it was like, oh, this was just thrown together, was barely anything. And it went viral for all the wrong reasons. People were kind of upset. This feels like that, based on how you're describing it, but more polished. Like, people are not going to demand a refund, but it feels like the Willy Wonkification of the theater experience, where it's like people do value those things, and you're sort of tapping into that. And if you have good marketing and good kind of ways of reaching people, you can make some money.
Fever was not willing to share those numbers with me in trying to ask, like, how many people who buy tickets go on to other arts experience? Are you really this gateway that you claim to be? How many people come back? And they do not discuss their ticket, any sort of metric. I know, shocking.
So if that were the case, like maybe there is some argument potentially for this being a gateway experience for people. Like maybe this is an entry point and people are like, oh yeah, I love going to live events. Although, Gemma, based on how you've described this, maybe folks might be a little underwhelmed by the actual performance itself. But the other aspect of this that I could see being a potential boon for the local scene is just artists need to be paid. Like,
yeah, get that
I
bag.
know you talked with some of the folks who have worked on these productions, and for obvious reasons, a lot of them didn't really want to say too much or, be too public about it. But I'm curious if you think there's an argument there for that. Like, is this just a way to pay the bills while people are pursuing whatever other passion projects they might have?
Totally. And I do not fault any artist ever for taking a corporate job to get paid. Like, it is so hard to make a living as an artist. It's so expensive to live in Seattle. Like, do what you have to do. That said, like, in terms of what it's going to do for like the long-term sustainability of our arts economy, I don't think that's a great thing. You're creating these sort of one-off jobs. And actually, that's one of the first things when I saw this listing for the first time at Seattle Rep, one of the weirdest things was there were 2 show dates, like a month apart. You're like, one at the end of June, one at the end of July. And I was like, who is this for? Like, that's not a job for anybody. That's, no one's getting paid for all of those, 8 weeks. Yeah, it's just, that's
not how it usually works.
That's not how it usually works. You're not getting, you get paid for rehearsal, and then you get paid for the run of a show, and that is like a contract. So seeing these sort of random one-off events is like, how much money are you really making? It's a patchwork like everything else is in terms of making this money. So like I said, I do not fault any artists for being involved in it. And I don't fault anyone for going. Like, it is being sold to you really hard, and like, good for you for trying it. And if you like it, that's also great. Like, we do not have to like the same things.
But I do think there's real benefit in knowing who is behind it and having more context for this. Since, as you reported, Gemma, there just wasn't much information online about it at all. But now, maybe with SEO, when people Google, if they want to find out, they'll find your piece.
Fingers crossed. It's really like anathema to local, like shopping local, consuming local. It is not contributing to the local economy. It is not giving anybody health insurance. It is not securing any substantial contracts that contribute meaningfully to an artist. Like, it is not doing any of that.
Seattle Times arts and culture writer Gemma Wilson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the new Boeing documentary. Yesterday, Netflix released a new documentary called Free Fall: A Reckoning for Boeing, which details Boeing's recent history. Joining Chase and me to discuss is Lex Vaughn, the founder and editor of The Needling, Seattle's only real fake news. Welcome, Lex.
Hi, good to be here.
So, Lex, in 2024, The Needling had so many Boeing headlines that you did a top 10 list at the end of the year. And I don't want to make light of what has been happening at Boeing. It's incredibly serious and concerning. And we'll get to some of the issues that come up in this documentary. But sometimes I feel like the only way to get through heavy stuff is to laugh. And I feel like your collection of headlines from that year gave us a pretty good rundown of the recent scandals that Boeing has been associated with. So you had one headline that read, Boeing celebrates D.B. Cooper Day by removing plane doors mid-flight. And I'm assuming that was a nod to the door that flew off one of
really
the Boeing
brought a lot
flights.
of Pacific Northwest, airplane lore all together right there.
Yes. I feel like the DB Cooper lore is so strong in this city. Like, I feel like I just randomly see graffiti of DB Cooper all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like after that door flew off the Boeing flight, it was a time where there was a lot of parodying of that, but also a lot of, obvious, genuine concern about what this meant about the safety of Boeing planes.
Yeah. And honestly, if you just watch the trailer for this new documentary called Free Fall, A Reckoning for Boeing, just the trailer brings you back to the actual terror that people must have felt when that door flew off. It's like, no, this is real. And I think I said at the time when I talked to people about this, I think even though there are worse Boeing accidents where everyone aboard died, what's unique about that one is not just that the door popped off. It's we get to hear the experiences of people who survived that and really thought, this is going to be it for me. And thankfully, they're still here. But they had that moment and lived to tell what that experience is like. So I think we got a little bit more of a vivid picture of really the terror that Boeing is willing to put anyone who travels through the air through, just to, cut a couple corners and hoard as much money for their, C-suite as possible.
Right. Lex, you alluded to the crashes where people did not survive. So in case folks forgot, there were 2 separate crashes of 737 MAXs in both 2018 and 2019, which killed a combined 346 people. Just awful. So Chase, you interviewed the director of this new film. Her name's Rory Kennedy. You interviewed her in 2022 when her other Boeing film, which was called Downfall, The Case Against Boeing, first came out. So that film came out after those 2 crashes of the 737 MAXs. And now this new film kind of follows up on what's happened in the interim. So what has changed between now and then? And how much of the same ground do the 2 films cover?
It covers a lot of the same ground in a way that I think is smart, to where if you only wanted to watch this one, you could. Okay. I would encourage folks to go back and watch the original because it does get into some specifics that this doesn't, specifically around what's known as the MCAS system. That was terrifying, but really critical and important to reflect on the failure that happened there.
Wait, say more about that.
So the MCAS system was essentially something that Boeing planes had that is a flight control software, and it automatically pushes the aircraft's nose down. That began to create very serious problems and caused issues that this one doesn't cover. Instead, what this one is about is the aftermath of, the Boeing company used to be a real place that people loved to work, that it was a union job. You could support your family, you could have a good life and make good products. And then the company culture shifted from a top-down level. A CEO from GE came in, whose policy at GE was, we fire the lowest 10% of people every year, which is a fear tactic and a cost-cutting measure that set the stage for what Boeing would become. They moved a lot of their operations out of Washington to South Carolina, which is notably not a union state. And this documentary has a scene of Nikki Haley saying, we don't need unions here. And then immediately just that being kind of followed up by, I think you might want those there, both for the well-being of the workers and also the quality of the end products, because everyone, there's behind the scenes camera footage where this guy will go up to people at Boeing facilities and ask, hey, my in-laws are going to fly in the plane. I want to make sure it'd be safe to do so. And one of them, darkly funny, says, well, they're just your in-laws. And it's like, oh God. And like they're making jokes to like deal with what kind of the documentary captures is everybody knows this is not what it should be.
Mm.
And what the big other distinguishing thing I would say, and what I appreciate about this documentary, is it has Dominic Gates, the former Seattle Times reporter, won a Pulitzer for his reporting on Boeing,
Right.
in it. He was not in the last one. And I think he brings a real refreshing clarity to a lot of it. And then it also focuses on the whistleblowers more specifically as well.
Between the first film and now this film, there was the death of John Barnett, who is a former Boeing employee and engineer who had been testifying against Boeing. And he died by suicide, it appears. And I know that the documentary gets into that a little bit as well as the other whistleblowers who have come forward since
in
then.
his name in many ways, like trying to carry on. That's the most moving part of it, of all of them saying he is gone. And that is obviously something that should not have happened. But it is something where we want to carry on as best as we can in his name. Because the thing is, and not to like go too far down this path, what has been interesting about the conspiracy theories that were born out of this is that the reality is itself already a deeply unsettling thing. That a whistleblower came forward and then the pressure he was put under, that's already happening out in the open. I wrote a kind of some reflections about it. This feels like horror villain stuff. Like, this is a documentary, but this is about people being kind of just relentlessly put through what shouldn't be something they should be put through, when they're just like, hey, maybe the planes should be safe. Maybe there should be certain quality standards that we have if we're going to have people flying on them. And so I think it is an unflinching but compassionate portrait of the workers, the whistleblowers, all trying their best to deal with this. But at the end, it's also still just pretty upsetting that there hasn't really been any accountability in a lot of regards for so much of what has happened.
I mean, 2024 is the year where we had like 40 plus headlines about, things that went wrong for Boeing that year, and a bunch of people associated with them. And if you need an even more concise version of that documentary, Last Week Tonight with John Oliver did a pretty good analysis of what Boeing was up to as well before 2024. So then that year it became kind of cartoonishly villainous, and we did have like, I guess, a lot of material you could say to pick up on, but it's like, it was very like dark and just out of this world, like just every week, like, how is this getting worse?
Speaking of, in more recent Boeing news, just last week, a Boeing Apache military helicopter crashed, killing 2 soldiers. And the U.S. Army said that it would ground that type of plane until they understand what happened in that crash. There's also some interesting developments with one of the Boeing unions. So, Lex, I know one of your headlines from 2024 is Boeing threatens striking workers with airline tickets.
Yeah.
And that references when the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers Union went on strike for a couple of months for a new contract. Now, a union representing 17,000 Boeing workers, so this is the Society of Professional Engineering Employees in Aerospace, they're trying to negotiate a new contract for the first time in over a decade. And the Seattle Times is reporting that there's kind of an interesting like blue collar, white collar tension happening here. So the 2024 contract negotiation was with blue collar workers, the machinists, and they secured a 38% general wage increase, which the Seattle Times reports compounds to roughly 43% over the course of that 4-year contract. And that these white collar workers in the professional engineering employees in aerospace group are now kind of hoping that they're going to get the same thing. But so far, that is not what Boeing is offering. I think the timing of this documentary is actually very interesting when you're also looking at the fact that these negotiations are happening.
No, yeah, it's a very relevant thing, because I think the kind of feeling that it sounds like the workers have been having across the board is we're slowly being devalued. And as they're being undercut by outsourcing and sort of all these other things that are just, again, about cutting costs and streamlining, it makes it a real open question of like, is Boeing a good place to work anymore? Like, I think that's a real question, whether it's a white collar job, whether it's a blue collar job. It seems like the general shift has been, in the eyes of the workers, to let's get things out the door as quickly as we can. Who knows if they even fit together? That was a detail where it's like, oh, things don't fit, or like in the case of the door blowing off, things weren't put back on, and there's no record of like who did that because everyone's being pushed so quickly to move as fast as they can. Like, these things inevitably break. I think how workers are treated goes hand in hand with then the quality of the aircrafts themselves.
I mean, I think what's really disturbing about this is it's not necessarily just a Boeing issue. Like, it is obviously specifically a Boeing issue, but it feels like, you know, so many different companies and industries are being pressed into more profit, working faster, and it just becomes more of a problem when there's a real safety component, like with flying. I mean, which brings to mind for me, this is the last question before I'll move on, but like, what do we do as consumers? Is there anything we can do? I mean, I was on a Boeing plane like 2 days ago, and I don't know. I'm like, do I just not fly anymore now that I know all of this? Like, is that really an option?
I'm planning a trip this fall somewhere, and I'm seriously considering taking Amtrak for the first time over a very large distance. Because I have lost a lot of confidence, not just in Boeing, but it's like, I think, like you said, I mean, you can go, you know, in on this in a granular way on Boeing, but this is happening at scale. Like, this way of thinking is happening in so many different, you know, huge companies and industries. I think what gets me when you watch some of these documentaries and pieces on what Boeing is doing, I think it's beyond greed. There's like a sadism here that's going on, because when you look at a lot of their decisions, like, I mean, they're kind of destroying themselves in a lot of ways. So many of the anti-union policies and moves they made were like damaging to the company and profits, and they're like, I don't care.
I'll take it a step further, and I'm going to stop referencing the review I wrote after this. It feels like it cannibalized itself.
Yeah.
Like, there was this moment where it was like, I guess line is going up, like we're cutting costs and executives are getting big compensation packages, which comes up near the end of year over year, just the amount of money people are being made. But it doesn't feel sustainable. But I guess it doesn't matter to you if you are able to squeeze as much out of it. It doesn't matter if the company's reputation and like long-term prospects start to take a hit. If you're able to strip it for parts, take what you need, and then move on to the next thing, that's what you're going to do. But when it comes to whether I would fly, I travel to film festivals and do that for work. And it is something I think about. I would love to take an Amtrak. I feel like even though it'd be long, you would get to see more of it is expensive. And so that is something to think about. Until
the Amtrak documentary comes out, you guys. And on tomorrow's podcast, we're going to solve all those problems.
Yeah.
Let's take a break. And when we come back, let's get into a quick midweek medley. It's Thursday, and we've got a couple of quick headlines for you all of recent news you might have missed. First, sorry, this is also a bummer. The Mariners, who a lot of us in town have had high hopes for this season, just had its biggest loss in franchise history. On Tuesday night, there was a 22-0 blowout versus the Milwaukee Brewers. Did you all see this game? I fortunately did not catch any of it.
I did not watch it, but I was teaching a Needling satire workshop, and towards the end, one of the students like lifted up their phone and was just like, and I didn't even know what I was looking at. I'm like, 22, what? Like, and you know what? A lot of people experienced this. Their phones told them the wrong score. It said the Mariners had 22, and it was 0.
Oh, no.
And we were all like, that can't be. And of course, fact check it. It's like, no, yeah, the Brewers scored 22, but 22. Oh my God.
The Needling headline, Lex, was so good. Mariners kick off football season with 0-22 shutout loss against the Brewers.
That's what it feels like. It's like, anyways,
it really is a football score.
season.
Yeah.
You know Mina Kimes? She's a great sports reporter. What she had said is the Seahawks gave up fewer points in 17 of 21 games last season.
Whew.
And so really, it's even worse than that.
Stat.
I think of that Simpsons thing of this is the worst day of my life, the worst day of your life so far. Because the Mariners are the Mariners. They're chaotic. They're all over the place. They had just, I think, done a kind of pretty good bounce back. And so that's what sports is to me. Have you all seen the history of the Seattle Mariners? I feel like I've referenced it on this podcast before. It's like an epic documentary about the Mariners, about how they started because of like arson and only exist because of that.
I need to put that on the list.
It's so good. And it's about how there is no other team like the Mariners. Mm-hmm. They are the ones that are the most like up and down, all over the place, chaotic team.
We got the Mets on the East Coast and we got the Mariners on the West Coast. This is what's up.
Exactly. And like, that's why you watch sports. And so I don't know.
The love of the game.
I'm optimistic that they could make a bounce back. And either way, it certainly is interesting to watch.
Dustin Nickerson, the comedian, tweeted, "Hot dogs from heaven, baseball from hell," which I thought was really good. Also, I really appreciated that our Mariners, the subreddit for Mariners, became about seafaring briefly.
I saw that.
Because people were like, it's so bad. People posting pictures of the Ocean Gate submersible and the Titanic.
I mean, it's probably one of the funniest sports fan bases, because it's the only way you can get through rooting for this
I feel like the key here through this episode has been humor helps us process heavy stuff. All right, moving on to a slightly more serious headline. Chase, I know you've got updates on the SIFF union negotiations.
Yeah, it's a brief one because I've been having lots of folks reach out about where things were at. Just to provide some context, it was last month where the SIFF Cinema Workers Union walked out of a screening of the Odyssey in 70mm at the SIFF downtown. Since then, they've been bargaining and going back and forth with SIFF, trying to come to what they hope can be a contract that addresses some of their concerns, considering wages, considering staffing levels. The piece I wrote in The Stranger gets into a lot more details on that, but the top level stuff is they are feeling more heard and that it's bargaining more fairly, but they are still awaiting more concrete movement on proposals. And so that's something I'll be keeping an eye on. We'll see how the rest of the year goes out, but they're in the kind of midst of that right now. And I know folks were having many questions about where things stand. That's the most up-to-date information I've been able to glean from this whole process.
Will we just keep it hot union summer, or will we roll that into hot union fall? We'll see.
Sometimes these things take time because you want to make sure that everything is being addressed as much as you can, but you obviously don't want it to drag on forever. You don't want to see it that come, I don't know, the next big blockbuster Dune, they're still not with a contract because they're
does Dune 3 come out?
It's in December.
Okay.
And so that's like quite a ways away. So we'll see. It's something I'm keeping an eye on, always available if folks have anything they would want to share. Because I think it's important in the Seattle movie-going scene to think about the workers and where they fit into the picture as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's all for today here at CityCast Seattle. Chase Hutchinson, thank you so much for bringing us the latest.
Thanks so much as always.
And the Needling's Lex Vaughn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm your host, Jane C. Hu, and listeners, we want to hear from you. Let us know if you've ever been to a Fever production and what you thought by sending an email to seattle@citycast.fm. You can also text us or leave us a voicemail on the CityCast hotline at 206-880-3931. Until next time, see ya, Seattle.